On today's installment of Locked On Texans, Coach D'Amico Ryan says the starters will play in Friday's preseason game. And can Cam Akers actually shake things up in the running back room?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, shout out to all of our returning listeners, what we call our everydayers, continuing to come back to listen to Cody and myself talk Texans. I'm your Texans football analyst, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, on the other side of the screen. Texans Credential Media member, Cody Davis. Today, we are going to dive into getting prepared for the second preseason game for the Houston Texans, which, again, guys, I think is at the advantage of the Texans to help them figure out a few things in terms of depth and just getting that roster ready and preparing themselves for any midseason or preseason roster moves that they could make with nearly $18 million. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The sports stop sporting sometimes. We kind of want them to keep going year-round. Everybody needs a break, though. But with FanDuel, they make sure that they keep you going with all of the fun. They're hooking up all customers, with a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Cody, take us away.
You talk about roster moves, man. I hope when we see these roster moves, it has nothing to do with injuries, because here we are going into the third week of training camp, and it seems like every single day somebody new is added to the injury report. So we're going to close out this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans talking about whether or not we should have some concerns with injuries. And like I mentioned in the cold opening, man, Cam Akers, I didn't expect much from him, but after the first preseason game, looking at how well he looked, it seems like he was one of a few bright spots when you take a look at the Texans preseason opening loss to the Chicago Bears. John, we got to talk about it. Cam Akers actually shake up this running back unit, and this idea actually came due to the fact that on yesterday's installment, when you was giving some of your quick takes, you mentioned, can Cam Akers actually take the helm as RB2? I don't think so, but I do believe that it's going to be a situation where he can actually shake up this running back room. But we're going to get this latest installment of Locked On Texans kicked off, talking about the biggest news that came out of, I think this was day 11 of training camp. They in Cleveland, and as you guys can tell, I'm not in Cleveland. John is not in Cleveland, but we still have a lot of our great colleagues who are in Cleveland. According to a good friend of the show, you guys already know, Brian Bedfield, Big Sarge. He was one of several of our colleagues who reported that, according to Coach D'Amico Ryan, that the starters will play in Friday's preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm actually excited about that, because not only do I want to see the starters and see Stephon Diggs make his, quote unquote, Houston Texans debut, not only do I want to see CJ Stroud as he begin for year 2, but I also want to see Justin Fields, dressed in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. And I heard, according to our good friend Chris Carter over at the Locked On Steelers podcast, Justin Fields been looking mighty good out there in Pittsburgh. But of course, keeping things here local, down here in the city of Houston, man, I love the fact that Coach D'Amico Ryan is actually going to make sure that majority of his starters are going to play in the second preseason game, because, John, I truly do believe this is where you definitely want to start making sure that the players understand everything that you've been trying to install and update for the 2024 season. I definitely would love to see Tank Dell, because this is going to be his first time playing after he went down with that broken leg. And of course, we have been raving about Tank Dell ever since OTAs, when we finally had an opportunity to see him. And even if he plays, 2 or 3 series, just getting an opportunity to get back in game shape or starting to get back in game shape is going to do wonders for him. Speaking of getting back in game shape, another guy that I'm going to be very excited to see is Titus Howard. I wanted to see him last week, and he should have played last week. However, knowing that he's part of that first team, I can't wait to see what Titus Howard got in store for us come Friday.
I'm really looking forward to seeing C.J. Stroud. If you guys remember on, I forget what podcast, but a couple of podcasts ago, we talked about, the defense had been having their way with the offense for the first couple of weeks. Like, put it like this, out of the first couple of weeks of training camp, the defense won majority of the days. And also the rain was playing a huge factor for the Houston Texans offense as they were going through the motions of installing, different things offensively. And Pep Hamilton was out there. And when he was out there, Pep Hamilton said, you guys got to remember, the defense is normally going to look better the first couple of preseason because you're seeing the offense go through the steps and the motions of installing what they need to. Well, Monday, according to our good friend Big Sarge, Jonathan Alexander, who's out there,
DJ Bieniemy,
DJ, who's out there. A few guys that we follow, some of the guys that are doing the groundwork for the Houston Texans local media. The offense was on fire. Aside from Azeez Al-Shaair, who had an interception on C.J. Stroud was lighting it up out there. And it just so happens that this is now the third week of preseason, so maybe some of the things that Houston was working on during the first couple of weeks of training camp is a little bit simpler now for CJ, and now he's, just more fluid out there as a quarterback. So I do want to see him, man. DJ even said the preseason hype that everybody has had around his team, fans, media alike, today was justified. Monday practice was justified for us. So I don't want to see them out there a lot. A couple of series and pull them, honestly. But I want to see what CJ has in store for year two. And if that kind of transcends to the other guys, because I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some of Dameon Pierce as well.
And with Coach D'Amico Ryan's talking about the starters, going to play, that also means that we're going to see Kamari Lassiter as well. And John, you wasn't here on Friday, but me and Sarge were talking. I did say that was one of the negatives that I thought the Houston Texans, that I wanted to see from the Texans, was to put like your rookie out there, Kamari Lassiter, because look, we understand that he's going to be CB2. However, I just felt like with that additional preseason game, he would have been a little bit more ready for the regular season, knowing that he's going to be starting opposite of Derek Stingley Jr., man. But I really do think like Friday is going to be one of, if not the most important preseason game heading into the 2024 season.
Which of the players that are going to be considered starters, because starters will play, which of those players do you think may need to be out there longer than the other starters? Like a Kamari Lassiter, for an example.
Kamari, I want to see Kamari play a half. I'm going to already say it. Play a half. You got to. He got to get his feet wet. Yes, he's looked good, but he got to get his feet wet.
Kamari is up there for me. A half, I can't be mad at that. Typically, years ago, it would be a half for a rookie.
I remember.
Going into game two. So I'm not necessarily mad at that. I would like to see Green and Juice out there a little bit longer. Those two are going to be starters. I'm not worried about Shaq Mason. I'm not necessarily worried about Titus Howard, though you can make a case that at least a quarter he needs to be out there. But if you want to go further than that, I'm okay with it. But I would like to see a good amount of snaps for Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. And on the defensive side, I would like to see a good amount of snaps for rookie Kalen Bullock as well.
Talk about Kalen Bullock. We talk about a lot of the starters. However, I think there's a guy by the name of Cam Akers who might, out of nowhere, might make this 53-man roster and actually play a vital role for the Houston Texans in 2024. Who knows? But we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break.
Sports are around the corner. College is around the corner. NFL is this weekend, so the NFL is officially back. You also got the Olympics that are helping get us through this drought that we are in right now in terms of sports. But don't worry, guys. If you need some more action, check out FanDuel. They are giving out all customers a boost or a bonus daily all summer long. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head on over to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NFL.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. And in the words of the great John, some sports guy Hickman, and for those of you who've been rocking with the show for a long time, you should know that some sports guy was John's middle name for the longest. Is it still?
I mean, yeah, you can say that.
in a way, that's how long me and John been rocking with each other. But in the words of John, so sports guy Hickman, the first preseason game, you really don't want to overreact. John, I don't want to overreact. I really don't. But when I take a look at Cam Akers, just looking at how fluent he looked in Thursday's game. Yeah. Once again, this is a guy who just came to the Houston Texans about 2 weeks ago. That first full week of training camp, he was here. I only saw him participating in individual drills. He had a couple reps doing 11 on 11 and 7 on 7, but it wasn't much. And remember, I came on this show saying I'm not expecting him to make the 53-man roster. I'm not expecting him to be part of the practice squad roster. Hell, I wasn't even expecting him to play meaningful snaps in the preseason. And when Coach DeMeco Ryans was first asked about the addition of Cam Akers, all he said was, we added him just to see if he could compete. Yeah. Now, after the very first preseason game, once again, looking at how fluid he looked coming off of not one but two Achilles tear, here is what Coach DeMeco Ryans had to say about Cam Akers' performance Thursday night.
Cam made a couple nice plays. I think everybody saw the plays that Cam made running the football and also with the receiving touchdown. Cam has a very, just savvy way of slipping off of tacklers, making plays. So I like where Cam was tonight, and he showed some playmaking ability, which he has shown in the past. It's just a matter of Cam continuing to get reps and build off of what he's done.
That sounds like there's been a change of plan from Coach DeMeco Ryans and most likely General Manager Nick Caserio. And John, the running back room is something that you and I have been talking about ever since the start of training camp. We have talked about it time and time again. You know who your top two running backs are. Dameon Pierce, Joe Mixon, who missed another day of training camp practice. However, Darrell Gumbarale, British Brooks, Gerard Jordan. I mean, that whole running back unit has looked good through the first 11 days of training camp. We saw majority, if not all of that, during the very first preseason game. Now you add Cam Akers to the list. A guy, when healthy, has always been a pretty solid and productive running back. Do you see a situation where he could shake up this room and actually make the 53-man roster?
I do. I really do. I think for Houston, when I do look at that backfield, like J.J. Taylor got some snaps. Mm-hmm. In the preseason, Darray got some snaps. Cam got some snaps. Jawar Jordan got some snaps. British Brooks got a snap. A carry. Overall, the Texans ran for 2.6 yards per carry, and Cam didn't necessarily run the greatest as well. 5 carries for 13 yards, but you look at 2 catches, 18 yards through the air, and 1 TD. I think for Cam making this roster, it's a real possibility. He's a vet. And I'm also looking at Joe Mixon has been out there for a while. At first I was not concerned. I was looking right? I was looking at the situation like, maybe they want to give Joe some good time to rest. He's been in the league a long time, a couple of vet days to get his body acclimated to Houston's heat and the weather and whatnot. Because the last time we saw him, I think that was something he mentioned, at the post presser. But now I am concerned. So I look at that playing in the favor of not only Cam Akers, by the way, even the rookies, even Darray making this roster with Joe Mixon being out as long as he's been. I look at the running back 3 role as something that this team needs to address to make sure that if Joe Mixon is not ready to start the season, then Dameon Pierce would be the lead back. How much of Dameon Pierce will we see get majority of those snaps? That could be a situation where we see some of those snaps increase for the quote-unquote RB3 on his team to kind of balance everything out. With that being said, yes, I do believe Cam Akers can make this team. I think there's something that he can add in terms of being able to run the ball. He still has that one cut, get up the field ability, doesn't do a lot of dancing. I think the output will be different if he played behind the starter offensive line. King Green, Juice Scruggs, Titus Howard, Shaq Mason, Larry Tunsil when he gets out on the field at some point. I'm not going to be looking at 5 for 13 for an entire game, right? So those numbers can kind of look nasty in the sense like, that's not sexy. And I get it, but look at some of the good things that he did Thursday, catching the ball out of the backfield, being able to be elusive as a running with the ball in his hands, making a couple of guys miss. That's what Cam Akers can bring to a team, and I think that has some value here in Houston that has question marks at the top with their number one running back. How long will he be out? Is Houston kind of preparing themselves right now to maybe miss him a little bit more than we are expecting? And if so, how will the, productivity be splitting up between that backfield? Will it be 15 carries for Dameon Pierce, or will we see 10 and 10 between the two running backs? Who knows? But they got to make sure that they keep talent, because I think that's been an issue for Houston in the past. Dameon Pierce was not successful as the lead starter running back, but they had Devin Singletary as the backup running back. And he was able to come in and have some good moments for Houston, had a career high on the ground. They can put themselves in a similar situation this year because they can kind of hide the fact that we don't have Joe Mixon if the two guys behind Joe Mixon, which is Dameon Pierce and whoever RB3 will be up for, can be productive as well. So I'm not looking for a one player to be Devin Singletary. I'm looking at multiple guys to kind of fill in that role until Joe Mixon can come back.
I do wonder if Cam Akers, has an opportunity to make the 53-man roster. I do wonder, does this mark the end of Dario Gumbawale here in Houston? Because I don't see a situation where they're going to put him on a practice squad. I mean, we could say here and say, special teams or whatever the case might be, not just for his kicking, because he has had more plays on special teams. But, I mean, just to me, Dario, ever since in Houston, whether in the rushing attack, passing attack, or with his blocking ability to a certain extent, he has always given this organization a little bit of value in the running back unit. However, if Cam Akers come in and shake up the unit, I look at Dario being the odd man out, because first and foremost, you're looking at a situation where at this stage in his career, his experience, and what he can provide, it could probably be useful to another team. In terms of British Brooks, Gerard Jordan, and J.J. Taylor, which one of those guys would you like to keep? Even though we were big on Gerard Jordan, I would like to see the Houston Texans keep British Brooks, because I think he's been the more productive running back so far here in training camp. However, when you go back to Thursday's game, it seemed like J.J. Taylor had the upper hand between those three guys. I believe he had the longest run of the night for the Texans, rushing for 10 to 12 yards between Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. So, I mean, look, Cam Akers changes a lot about this offensive backfield. I said this before the start of training camp, and I'm going to repeat it again. Make sure you guys keep your eyes on what is taking place with that offensive backfield. And speaking of the offensive backfield, John, you already alluded to Joe Mixon. At first, I wasn't worried. Now I'm really starting to get concerned. Texans, they're still floating around with we just give our veterans rest. However, you're not going to rest no veteran this long in training camp for any reason. So on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about whether or not it's time to be concerned with the Houston Texans and injuries.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day, or maybe you never skip therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like that, if you feel like there's no time for yourself, the non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and convenient to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. a Swiss therapist at any time for no additional charge. Never skip a leg day. Never skip therapy day. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get started today. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, is there reason to be concerned with the early injuries? Cody, I'm going to let you take it away.
I think so. I mean, after one preseason game, some of these players played, some of them didn't play, but the injury list for the Texans, it's getting ridiculous. According to Aaron Wilson of KPRC, these were the players who did not practice in Cleveland on Monday. Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Blake Fisher, Lonnie Johnson Jr., Jake Hansen, Kamari Lassiter, Noah Brown, and Jeff Okudah. They joined a list that was already pretty concerning when you take a look at the fact that Laramie Tunsil, Joe Mixon, and Christian Harris has yet to, well, not has yet, but they was already sidelined even before they departed for Cleveland. And of course, in the case of Laramie Tunsil and Christian Harris, neither one of those guys has yet to practice in any training camp. John, for the second year in a row, I'm looking at the Houston Texans dealing with injuries early on, and I'm thinking to myself, man, one, what can they do to prevent these injuries? And two, and most importantly, how much can these injuries actually, in some type of way, have a negative impact on the Houston Texans? And like I mentioned, one of my biggest takeaways from Thursday's game, they can't afford, especially on that defensive side of the ball, they cannot afford to have several injuries, and you looking at the depth or the lack thereof in a lot of these positions, especially especially when you take a look at the secondary as well.
I think, let me say this, I think that Justin Simmons and his agent have been taking their time. I really do. I think that they're waiting to see how multiple teams' rosters in the NFL shape up. And I think that they're going to be picky with who they sign with. I do think Houston is in that running. In terms of maybe a list of favorites for Simmons, because Quandre Diggs is in Tennessee now.
With Tennessee.
Yeah, so you look at Tennessee getting a veteran safety. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I do think Justin Simmons to Houston is still a possibility. I think between himself and his agent, they're kind of looking at teams like, okay, we fit better with what you're doing, and we believe you have a real chance to, make it to the Super Bowl. So we're going to sign with you to, kind of be that X factor to put you over the hump. That said, one injury that I've been really concerned about as of lately, like the last few days, I haven't seen Christian Harris.
I know.
And this is Christian Harris' third year.
At least, I was going to say real quick, at least with Laramie Tunsil, it's just more so him recovering from that offseason knee procedure he had. Right. So, I mean, that makes sense.
All right. With Laramie, I'm not worried. Like, I think Laramie can just kind of
wake up and get ready for week one.
I'm ready. Don't worry about it. But I'm kind of concerned with not seeing Christian Harris out there because he's going to be a part of the first team. He's a starter on this defense. And with some of the changes and updates, I just hope that when he does finally play, he's not able to build off of last season because he's behind a little bit. So I look at that factor. Joe Mixon, I'm starting to get concerned, as we mentioned. And my concern level is even higher because though I believe Dameon Pierce will bounce back this year and be a much better back, Houston traded for Joe Mixon, albeit a 7th rounder, but then extended him for 3 years. And so I know they want to get him out there to be the running back that they believe he can be for this team. And I also don't know how much can we place on the shoulders of Dameon Pierce until we know how much we can place on the shoulders of Dameon Pierce. Like, if that makes sense, like, I don't want to see right now Dameon with 15 or more carries.
That's fair.
And I think that's fair. And it's not a shot to him. That's just based off of last season. 15 carries is not good for Dameon Pierce right now until we see otherwise. Now, once we see otherwise, my concern may go down, but not ready to see that. the only group that I'm okay with right now on the offensive side of the ball
is quarterback.
It's quarterback and receiver. So you got you. Well, I think even with tight end, I'm fine. With the tight end group, I'm fine. So I'll take that statement back. But there are some injuries that are happening across his team. I'm like, guys, I want to see some of these guys out there. I want to see Christian Harris by the third preseason game.
Hopefully, but the way things looking, I don't think he's gonna be ready by the third preseason game.
So how concerning is that going into the week? Like
very.
And mind you, Houston has 4 preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
So
I want to say
the last one is like if anybody's just not coming back, a tune-up for a series or 2.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that third preseason game, that's basically going to be a whole week of training with the Los Angeles Rams. So
joint practices. And that's what Christian Harris shines, by the way. Only beat people up during practices.
Oh yeah. So
Lonnie Johnson, that's where they shine at.
Well, yeah, but Lonnie, he's one of those guys. He's actually dealing with in concussion protocol as of right now. And look, with Christian Harris, man, this is one of the small little frustrating things about working with coaching staffs and stuff as of right now during training camp, because we've all have asked about Christian Harris as of right now, and we haven't really gotten too much of what is going on with him. But John, to your point, third week of training camp, second preseason game coming up on Friday. And the only time, I think we only saw Christian Harris twice, and both times he was literally walking past us to go from the training field back to inside to arena to get whatever rehab treatment he needs to get. But hopefully, Christian Harris will be ready come week 1 of the regular season. That's something Coach D'Amico Ryans has continued to repeat time and time again. So at the end of the day, hopefully all of these guys, especially Laremy Tunsil and Christian Harris and Joe Mixon to a certain extent now, will be ready to face off against the Indianapolis Colts, because I guarantee you the Colts will be ready, because the Texans ended their season last year, and with them coming back with a healthier quarterback in Richardson, you're looking at it that week 1 game could be very competitive. Let's just leave it at that.
And it's been some good preseason,
trash talk
between the two franchises. So
the whole division, if you think about it.
Yeah. No, it really has been. I mean, this division can be fun this year. No doubt about it. A lot of people think
I got it as most competitive, man. You heard it from me first. Most competitive division is going to take place right here in the AFC South.
In the NFL.
I understand that division with Cleveland and what is it? Cleveland, Pittsburgh.
AFC North.
AFC North. I understand AFC North,
but
it's
a good division.
In the words of Outkast, the South got something to say.
Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans, and give me a follow as well at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.